Happy holiday Monday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Hockey Hub, episode 67, Adam Pellerin. I've had Casey co-hosting with me the last few weeks. Good to have you back. The grind doesn't stop for you. You're looking tanned. You're looking all summery. How's it going?
It's going really well. Spent some time outside at Fenway Park this past weekend with the Orioles series. We didn't have a lot of sun, to be honest with you. A lot of rain delays, a lot of postponements. Oh, yeah. But, I've been outside a little bit, you know. I mean, it is the unofficial start to summer, so I'm embracing that. And hopefully the tan just gets bronzer and bronzer as we get further along.
I'm going to be competitive with you on that. I'm going to try to tan myself. But yeah, I'm in Toronto. For those of you watching, I'm back home visiting my parents. We had crappy weather all weekend as well, but whatever. Bright things ahead. I always forget, as the host of the show, before we bring in our guests, just to remind people, Hockey Hub, Mondays and Wednesdays, live at 10 a.m. Catch it on all the Nesson social channels, YouTube, podcasts, everything. Pretty much we're everywhere. And Adam, I just want to go through the rundown really quick. We're going to have Andrew Ference join us in like 10 seconds, and we're going to talk all things Bruins, as well as, of course, big potential sweep coming up in the postseason. So we're going to look ahead to that and the World Championships of Hockey, because there's some good Bruins news that came out of that. So that's kind of the rundown of the show. But let's bring in our guest right now, Andrew Ference, joining us for a good half of the show at least. Andrew, thanks for being with us and back on Nesson. I know you and Adam have had a go at it, so welcome back as a friend of the show.
Well, my pleasure. Last time I was a cartoon, I believe, so this is the real version, I guess. But apparently the real version of Adam's even better with a nice new tan.
You know, I didn't expect my tan to be the hot topic here on the Hockey Hub, but I'll take it, man. When you're bronze, you're bronze. You're looking good, and you're looking good. So I'll take it, baby.
One time, actually, before we get into it, so during the winter, like being on air, especially in the winter months, like you're very, and I'm a white person, I'm very, very white and pale. So I do put on self-tanner once in a while just so I don't look translucent on air. And one time I decided to put it on before a show, so at like 3, whatever, I got out of the shower, and then I was watching like a pre and post game show, and I was watching the tan progress as the show went on. So like 6 o'clock pregame, I looked okay. By 11 o'clock, I was like, oh crap, I put on way too much. I was very orange. So mistake. I was like, this is bad. This is not good. Never do it before you go on air. Okay. I know you guys don't use self tanner, but just in case you hit a day when you might need to, don't take it from me. Don't do it the day you have a show.
Fair enough. Ference too. Like you're. I mean, obviously we did the animated broadcast, the best snow day ever, and it was a lot of fun. I liked our avatars. You know, I mean, I think that the pigmentation was good. You know, that's a nice, healthy. You know, it's not one way or the other. I thought we looked pretty good. So, I'm just trying to emulate that, I guess.
It was a lot of fun. Well, Sophia, I'll take your tip hot and make sure that I'm not messing up the cameraman's white balance.
Yeah, exactly. No self-tanner before the show.
Yeah. Well, good to be with you.
Sorry, dude. I feel like I just cut you off. I mean, listen, we have you for a lot of the show, but we definitely want to talk coaching with the Boston Bruins, because it's just the hot topic right now. Everyone's kind of waiting. Fans, staff, I'm sure, us as broadcasters, we're kind of waiting to see what Don Sweeney and the team decide to do. And apparently, according to reports, that there's going to be some final decisions made pretty soon. So just like a general lob for you before we get into specific candidates, do you think having Bruins history in your resume, so obviously being a former Bruins player, with where the team is at, with this kind of being called a retool, with, you know, a lot of the core gone, and with a lot of the guys on the team now younger guys, do you think that matters when it comes to preserving the culture, or should that not be a factor at all?
Oh, nice easy one to start off with. Thanks for the lob. I can't wait for the fastball.
Sorry.
No, but I mean, I think it does. I think that it depends what your priorities are, I guess, is the bringing, a history with the team and whatnot into it. Like, it can matter. I guess it really depends what you're going for. Like, when I think of the Bruins, I think of obviously the culture, going back and what the team's been proud of. But there's many years where there wasn't a good culture. It wasn't like the good personality of what the fans would want out of the team and whatnot. So, just because you threw on a sweater and kind of went on the ice and were a Bruin, depending on how you played or, who you are or, the culture that you were involved with, during the team, like that's going to, be a wide-ranging group of people, depending on, when they put the jersey on. So I think that for me, like I said, I think of our era and when we came in and especially with Claude and Chara and Bergeron, all kind of coming in at the same time and the real focus on, getting back on track of like, what is it that this fan base wants? Because I think there's two separate things. You can try to develop like a good hockey team and you can try to put a good hockey team together that has good hockey players with skill and that can do different things on the ice. And you can put a coaching staff together that's really good at X's and O's and smart with hockey. But that's not all that the fans want. They want to be proud of, what their team represents and the way that they play. And as we all know too well, like you're not going to win the Stanley Cup every year. So how do you have a fan base that can walk out of a rink on any given night and be very proud of what they just watched and the team that represents them as a city? And then at the end of the season, obviously you want to win. And, I got to experience, million plus people or whatever in the parade. And you get to have a lot of fun like that. But I experienced the other 7 years where we didn't have a parade. But I felt like I was able to walk out of that rink proud. People on the street and fans that you'd meet were proud of our team and who we were. And so I think that's the secret is what are you trying to build? If it's just we have to win the cup or people will be disappointed, like you're going to be disappointed a lot. So I don't know, like I think that, the coach to me really sets the tone for the entire group in both the seriousness of what you're actually trying to accomplish, the bigger picture of who you want to be as a team and what you want to represent, as far as the city's concerned, the people wearing your hat and the jersey out in the street, like what do you represent to them? The accountability within the room, like in practice and in games, like that's all the coach. It's not just, somebody sitting in a back room with some brilliant hockey mind doing X's and O's on a sheet of paper. Like, hockey's not that complicated. There are smart technical coaches that, can do that and, have smart little plays that might get you a goal here and there. But the coach's real job is, like I said, to really set the culture, set the tone, hold players accountable, literally drag, the maximum effort out of guys over the course of a very long season. That's what a coach is doing. And I think that the one thing that's sometimes lost is that you're not just dealing with like mature men. Like you're not going into some corporate world where you have, 30 and 40-year-old, workers. You're dealing with some very young men who are coming out of, junior hockey and, college, or even some of the ones that have been in the league for a while, like that need guidance and not just on the ice, not just through X's and O's. And so I think a coaching job is so much more than just who's really smart at hockey and who can draw up good plays. So that's a really long answer to, if it matters whether or not you're a Bruin, but in my opinion, somebody that gets it and somebody that understands, who Boston people are, who Boston fans are, the people in the crowd, what they're proud of. That's important, really important, I think, in that market, because you're going to lose games. You need them to walk out of that rink proud of how you played even when you lost.
I'm interested to get a player's perspective, a former player's perspective. We had Andrew Raycroft on our other show, Boston Center, the chat last week, and I was sort of curious, right? Because you have stars in the room when talking about the Boston Bruins: David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman. You have established veterans as well, and the Bruins are going through a retool right now, and so it's sort of not uncharted territory, but it's been a while since the Bruins have had an offseason like this where they have such a high draft pick that they're looking for a coach, that they're trying to build back up to what they were. And I asked Razor about this. how involved are the Stars in a coaching search, right? Does the GM talk to a David Pastrnak, get his thoughts on, potential candidates? And Razor said, no, they don't get involved at all, right? Sidney Crosby was asked the same kind of question. He's like, that's not my job. But I am curious from this perspective, how interested are you in who is going to be the next coach from the standpoint that, are you looking at experience? Are you looking at somebody who you've heard is a good communicator? I'm just interested in how invested a player is when a head coaching search is going on. If you're hoping for one guy, if you don't care, you just want to get back out there and you hope that it's a good leader. What's the mindset?
Well, I guess if I answered the question compared to other people, you get a different answer every time,
right,
depending on what the player's looking for, right? Let's be frank. Like there's players that don't want a coach that's going to hold you accountable in practice. They want to be able to just show up every once in a while and have a nice easy day. So I guess it depends on who you are, right? For me personally, I think that who I had as coaches and any kind of perception of who I thought they were before they became my coach, you can kind of throw it out the window. Who somebody is in day-to-day operations in the locker room that you're interacting with, that's leading the meetings, that's running the bench, that's having those little conversations, that's doing the team leadership stuff, all those kind of intimate conversations that you have behind closed doors. You learn who somebody is that way through who you see on TV or post-game interviews, or what you might have heard about them. You really don't have a clue about who they actually are and what kind of coach they are. There's some very well-spoken people out there that can hold a presser and look amazing and be terrible communicators in the room. It's almost like they're reading from a script. That to me is there's an inauthenticity to that I hated, and you wouldn't know that until you're actually in a day-to-day interaction with that person. And then there's others that, might come across, terribly in public, but be an incredible coach. And so you don't really know it till you got it. So I think, to Razor's point, doing any kind of asking about, who you might like or something like that would be a fool's game for sure. Because most players wouldn't know the coaches intimately enough to have an opinion that really matters. And also, it's not, at the end of the day, you pick the wrong coach. That's not on the players. That's on the GM, right? And the president to get that right and to be the leaders, right? The buck stops with them. Back to my first point, you're trying to set the tone and the culture of a team. You're not just trying to make players happy. So, who do you want, leading the charge? You want the coach to set, the culture of the team. And no matter who your captain is or your best players, they're going to do the stuff on the ice, but day in, day out, how the practices are run, how the team is run, the tone and messaging within the room, that's the coach is doing a lot of that. The players can take ownership of the room and help with the culture and shoulder a lot of that, I think, once the team's a little bit more mature. But especially if you're going through any sort of revamp or, you're going to have a big crop of younger guys or new people to the club, you need somebody that's going to be, carrying that flag of like I said, that this is who we are. This is what's acceptable, on our team. And that's the coach. That's not Pasta's job.
I love a lot of what you said there, and I just want to highlight like you said, the difference between what you see in the media versus what's really going on in the room. And as someone who's covered a lot of different teams, mostly in the NHL, obviously not going to call anybody out right now, but could not be more true. And some coaches are really good at playing the media, giving them the best answers, really being friendly with the reporters, because they know a lot of these guys and girls eat that up when, myself too, when I get a great answer from a player or a coach who takes a lot of time to directly answer my needs, you have this automatic bias. You're like, wow, I love this person. They're great. And coaches know if this person's going to be writing about me, this is how, they know how to play that. So absolutely very, very fair and valid point. What you see out there is not what you're always getting in the room. But anyway, wanted to comment on that. That's not where I'm kind of going with this. Want to get a little bit more specific with the coaching surge and some of the candidates. Marco Sturm being, I don't know if he's at the top, but among the top. We've been talking about him for a couple weeks now, and his name is still circling where other names have kind of fallen off. So that being said, we don't know what we're getting with when you don't know someone personally, but you do. So what are your thoughts there on player versus coach is a different person, but on Marco and what he could bring to a Bruins organization again?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I put an asterisk beside everything just because I haven't been, coached by these guys, and it's. I kind of, it isn't my place to be giving my 2 cents. Like, I don't know, but I can definitely speak to, Marco as a player and a person. And he's incredible in both categories. An absolute competitor. I mean, I think going back to, guys that were in that little era that when I was there, there are a few that you're like, damn, I wish that guy could have been on our team when we won, because he deserved it, and he's at the top of that list. Marco, in practice, in day-to-day life, he was a fierce competitor, very serious. He took his job. He was a real professional about it. Like, he took his job very seriously, which sounds silly to say, but like, that's not always the case. Some guys are just there to play hockey and have fun. I'm in the NHL and this is great, but he was very serious about his preparation, the way he trained, the way he practiced hard. And yeah, he was one of those guys that you could always count on. Like, you always knew what you were going to get. He was very consistent and in his effort and preparation. So I think like those are all qualities, like, to me, that are, of course he's a good coach, because those things transfer over into that world very well. So like I said, yeah, I never had him behind the bench. Obviously I've seen him and his progress over the years since he retired, and he's definitely one of those guys I smile for, because he deserves it for sure. Really good guy. I like I said, I don't want to heap too much praise just based on that, but he's easy to heap praise for because of the quality of person he is.
Marc Savard also said to be a candidate as well, another former teammate of yours. But I wanted to ask you this, Andrew. When you were playing, and you mentioned all of those qualities that Marco Sturm had as a teammate, were there guys who you played with over the years that you were like, yeah, this guy's going to be a head coach someday?
Yeah. Not really. There's you always wonder, I guess, a bit. Like, there's certain guys you kind of look around, and some are pretty surprising when they get into coaching. To me, the thing about coaching now is, especially with guys with a long career, and I went through it myself. Like, you get to the end of a very long career, and even from thinking about Marco specifically, Marco is the reason why I asked for a no trade clause in my last contract with the Oilers, because I watched him, and the end of his career, he got bounced around. I don't know how many teams he played for, like probably 4, or was it even 5 maybe in the last 3 years or something like that. And he had a young family he was a great dad too, like he was very, very involved with his family and very, into his kids and what they were doing and stuff like that. And so the end of his career, he bounced around to, I don't know, somebody correct, you guys can correct me. You guys are the Nesson, you can fact check it.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, no, I mean, he went from Boston to the Kings, to the Caps, to the Canucks, and to the Panthers. That's where he ended up.
Yeah, in just a couple of years.
Right, so, exactly. Consecutive years, right.
So he, you get to an end of a long career like that, and then you're presented with the opportunity of like, what now? And yeah, coaching's attractive as far as like, I want to stay in the game, have another chance at winning the cup, doing all this stuff. But you're jumping right back into the world of the grind, right? Like, he's, I don't know what his journey is exactly, but I know he's over in Europe and coached the national team, and he was in the AHL for a while. And like, you're back on the bus and you're back on the schedule and doing the thing. And so probably the biggest perk of retiring from a long career of playing is just your schedule, right? Like, getting your life back to a certain degree. And so to jump back into coaching, like, I guess even if a guy could be a really good coach, like sometimes you wonder, like, does he really want that lifestyle, to just continue on? And so, yeah, two things I guess could be true at the same time. I could obviously see the coaching qualities that he would have, and obviously, certain guys of how they would be. But I won't lie, I'm surprised that, like I said, after jumping around like that and bouncing around, that you'd want to get straight back into coaching and kind of continue the wheel of moving around every year or two.
We're going to send it to break right after this really quick follow-up, because I want to kind of loop this or bow tie this coaching chat, and then we'll get into some other stuff on the other side of the break. But really quick, we're hearing a lot about the new NHL. I think that's been like a term for a long time, but in terms of the different styles, coaching styles from 50 years ago, let's say, to today. And as you mentioned in your answer to Adam, it depends on what kind of player you are in terms of what works, what you want, what you don't want. But any specific coaching traits, whether it is conversations, constant conversations and communication, whether it is pushing you in practice, whatever, XYZ, that really stood out to you and shaped you as a player that you liked out of your coaches? Anything stand out that worked for you that you feel like translates into today's game?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like I said, I think the best coach I ever had was honest, and honesty isn't always nice, but it's honest, and it's not just negative honesty, right? Like, I think that there's positive reinforcement, which is important, but it has to come from a real place. But you have to be honest about the negatives as well, and in areas of improvement. So coaches that can create a world that's very black and white, exactly what your role is, exactly what's expected of you, all those things, they're not kind of this gray area of like, what am I supposed to be doing? Who am I supposed to be? What kind of player does he want me to be? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Like, there's a lot of coaches that don't properly, let their players know some of those very basic things. And so I think coaches that are very honest, that aren't afraid of confrontation and telling a star player what he might need to be doing better, or what, parts of his game, are going to help his career, and then holding people accountable. Because it's easy to say some of those things, and like, this is who we're going to be, and this is what our culture is going to be, and this is, the type of team that we're trying to develop. And then you don't hold people accountable for it. Like, it's crazy. Like it's very easy to set the vision. It's much harder to hold people accountable, to achieve it. And so, I had coaches that were incredible at that, and they weren't always the nicest people, and they weren't always the best spoken or whatever. But I always had the most respect for guys that were incredibly honest about me as an individual, and this is what I need from you, and this is, you're a professional now, this is what's expected of you. But then I knew that they were doing the exact same for the rest of my teammates, from the stars all the way down to the fourth line, and it's just across the board, right? So I think that kind of accountability and honesty is the number one thing that a coach can do. And new NHL or not, like I said, you don't have to run around and be a dictator and jerk about it, but you can be honest and hold people accountable in a productive way, right? Like, you don't have to be mean or some kind of drill instructor to do that. So, and also, like, don't bring players in that can't take that. If you can do the Mishi and score a cool goal, and you got great hands and you can skate really fast, but you can't take criticism, like, I don't want you on my team. Don't bring guys like that in.
Love that. I 100% agree. Love that answer. And in like the little behind the scenes research I've done, that seems to be a common thread. Players just want to they want to know their role. They want to be told what to do. They're going to do it, and they want everyone to be on the same page. We can keep going, but we'll have to send it to break for now. We're going to be back with Adam and Andrew Ference on the other side of Hockey Hub. We'll see you guys in a quick sec.
Welcome back to the Hockey Hub. Adam Pellerin, Sophia Jurksztowicz, and once again joined by former Bruins defenseman Andrew Ference. We started off the conversation talking about the Bruins head coaching vacancy and what candidate might be the right role and what type of personality might be the right fit for Boston. We also have the draft coming up next month, and the Bruins have their highest pick in a long time. They have the number 7 overall pick. And, there's a lot of focus on the draft, Andrew, and obviously, the players that are coming in, they need development. But, what kind of qualities do you look for in a potential NHL prospect?
I mean, I've never been involved in a combine, where you go and watch, guys train, and I know they have the interviews and sit downs and stuff. And so I imagine it's a bit like speed dating, especially these players that, are going to be meeting with a whole bunch of teams, and you have a few short minutes to actually meet with them. And I guess to your point earlier, like you can say the right things and sweet talk pretty well, especially for a short time, and trick people. So I don't know if I'd put too much weight on that, that little interaction. But I guess that's where your scouting, really does, pay dividends, and you'd hope that, the background was really done on, not just, like I said, the skill set of a player and what he can do on the ice, and, how quick he is, or, his hands, how good they are, but really, really dive into, what kind of personality you're getting. And I think that dovetails into the first point about, what kind of team are you trying to build? And if it is just skill, and you just want to win with skill and speed, then great, you go for those qualities, right? But if you're trying to build, like I said, what I see Boston as, and that comes with a certain type of attitude, and I could not put enough emphasis on how important that side of it is. I think there's a couple different ways to try to get into, obviously what type of attitude a guy has. I mean, I think that scouts, you talk to coaches in junior, you talk to parents, that kind of stuff, and find out a lot about the player, and hopefully you're interacting with that player enough to get a good sense of who they are. But there was a couple stories. I guess there's a couple ways to, I think, find the attitude. So when I was playing, I used to train with a bunch of Olympic athletes. I lived up in the mountains, and there was skiers and speed skaters and cyclists and triathletes and biathletes and all these Olympic athletes, because I was just outside of Calgary in an Olympic training center. And so I didn't really train much with hockey players, and really helped my career, especially with recovery and all these kind of different things. But we used to do all of our training on bikes once we come back to training camp. And so I just slaughter guys, because, all my training, I would be with these cyclists and all these other athletes that was their job, right? Is finding these little milliseconds of time in their sport to really compete. And they taught me everything I knew. And one of the high performance coaches that worked with those athletes told me something about the VO2 test. And so the VO2 test is the one where you got the thing on your face, and they're measuring your oxygen in and air out, and there's some calculation that shows just how efficient your body is at while it's at stress and exercising really hard. And it's a very physiological test, right? So how fit are you? But he said the magic with that test is that it's actually a great test for attitude, because as they're watching the data come through, it's going up, you're working really hard, and then obviously people stop at a certain point. But he said that you can really tell from the graph of the VO2 test of the players that kind of hit that really, when it gets hard, you kind of plateau. And then there's some athletes that always give it right, they empty the tank, and they'll actually empty it out. And so the graphs of certain players or athletes, that have that extra grit, there's a little plateau, and then there's a last little spike where they really empty out the tank. And so I learned that pretty early. And so as the years kind of went on, that was always my goal, right? To always make sure I had the last little spike, and talked about it with some of the trainers on different teams that I had. And they said that correlates. And so my point of this whole long story about VO2 testing is that it's not really always about just the physical testing and what somebody can do with their body, but that little spike. You want players like that. You want people like that. That it gets really hard, and it sucks, and it hurts, and you're kind of at that plateau, and you have two choices, right? There's a fork in the road of this sucks, this is hard, this hurts, I'm tired, that was pretty good, I'm sure my score is pretty decent. And then, you fall off. And then there's those other guys that are I'm going to literally push myself until I fall off the spike. and those are the ones that have that last little spike. And so, as much as you can, like, determine who those players are. You want a room full of people like that, and obviously, they have to stick handle, they have to have a good shot, they have to be able to skate. Those are the obvious things. You can go to a rink and watch people play and see what they can do on the ice and see their skill level and kind of anticipate, what they're able to do, what their potential is. But the attitude part and who they are when things get tough, because they are, they're bound to get tough in the playoffs, in game 62 and back-to-back nights or whatever it is, right? There's plenty of opportunity for things to get tough. And you want a room full of guys that don't care, that have an extra kind of X factor, that wins championships. You see who's in the playoffs now, right? You see who gets celebrated in the playoffs, like Sam Bennett, for example, in Florida. Like, I want a room full of Sam Bennetts. Was he, on the cover of all the draft things his year, or was he the top prospect and the fancy draft pick? Like, no, but that type of attitude is what wins you championships. Obviously, the Bruins have plenty of examples as well, but that's what you have to go for.
When the Bruins PR staff is going to be surprised when they get an email from me later saying, "Hey, can I have all the results of the VO2 tests of the guys on the roster, guys? I want to see who's got the grit that you're talking about." But no, that is such awesome insight. And I joke sometimes about so Andrew, I didn't play hockey professionally growing up. I played with my brothers and my neighbors, rinks in the backyard, so on and so forth. So. Now in this career, my kind of imposter syndrome is gone. But for a while, I was like, I didn't play on a professional level. Do I really know what I'm talking about? And of course, there's an element of the game that I'll never be able to understand in a way a former hockey player did. But anyway, I do this whole soliloquy here and this monologue is to say that sometimes my storylines and my story angles are so far away from X's and O's, and they're about character and grit or family things. And it just makes me happy to hear that from a former player that you're not just focused on X's and O's, and that you're paying attention to things like between the lines, reading between the lines, and we just talked about culture, we talked about coaching, communication, but for a long time the way sports were covered, it was just plays and stats, and now we're kind of getting personality and stories and the behind the scenes, and that's just a really good, the VO2 test story. It's just a really good marker, and I like it, and it'll come up in a question when Bruins media availability comes back in the off season. But on that note, so you mentioned Sam Bennett, and I kind of wanted to talk about off-season needs for the Boston Bruins. I don't know if you want to talk specifically about the Bees, because I don't know how much time you've had to pay attention to the season that was had. But if you want to get specific with the Bees, or just in general, success in the NHL, what are off-season needs what are some key tools when we're talking about positions and skill and I guess character that maybe the Bruins are missing and that you'd want to see on your team if you were building one?
Well, I think I'm pretty unqualified to talk about any really specifics, to my earlier point, because I'm not in the room, right? And I'm not getting paid by the Bruins to do that. So if it was my job, it would be a different story. I'd give a very thorough opinion. But I think that, like I said, I think it goes back to, my opinion of the Bruins is yes, you're trying to win hockey games, but there's a bigger picture to the business of sports, right? And you're obviously trying to win the Stanley Cup every year. You're trying to win games, but you're running a business, and ultimately you want, like I said, going back to our earlier part of our conversation, you want people around that city to be proud of who you are as an organization and as a team. The easiest way to do that is obviously the product on the ice, the character that comes through, in the way that you play, the determination, the never quitting, being tough, standing up for each other, all of the things that I think that we talk about Bruins hockey, and that's what Bruins hockey is. And But it's not like that by default, right? Like you don't just throw on a Bruins jersey and all of a sudden become all those, you don't have those characteristics just because you're wearing the jersey. Like you have to earn them, and you have to continuously revamp, and reprove that is your culture and that is who you are, right? So, yeah. So I think I think that you build a team based on those characteristics of what's going to give you a chance to win hockey games, but also who's going to represent what you want to be in the best possible way on the ice, in the community. I think is incredibly important. I think one of the things that we did as a team when we won in that era of, well, obviously winning the cup, but also the years that kind of bordered on either side, is that our guys were walking the streets in the community, in really ingrained into the neighborhoods, especially obviously the North End, really well. And I think that matters. People build a connection with the team, through their players and through their personalities. And I use this kind of analogy a lot at work, is that it's very hard for a lot of fans to feel a connection to a player, like through their wrist shot or through the way that they skate. Like it's like you buy a player's jersey more because you can relate to them, usually through their personality. Like, oh, Ference, he likes cycling, or he's really into sustainability, or he's into gardening or cooking or whatever, and so am I. He's just like me. That's my guy. That's my favorite player. Or like Marchand, like the way that he's kind of I was a little brother or little sister just like that loved poking my older sibling and being a little disturber, right? Like that's my guy. Maybe somebody's into barbecuing or fishing or whatever it is, and the way that they come across in interviews after the game or in between periods, like that's your chance to display your personality and who you are as a person as well, right? How you get involved in the community and the things that you're doing outside of the rink, showing up and whether it's a charity event or not, it's just showing up in the community in a way that shows that you care and shows that you care about not just collecting your paycheck, but also being a proud Bostonian, and those things really matter, I think, when you're trying to build up a successful franchise and a successful team. And so, yeah, you're looking to free agency as a chance to obviously get good hockey players, but you really need to get good people and people that fit that kind of mold. And it's so much bigger than just trying to win games. You're trying to make a fan base in the city proud.
It comes with the territory, and it's something that Brad Marchand had grown into during his time with the Bruins and became one of the greatest Bruins of all time, on and off the ice. And I want to transition to the playoffs with that said, and his fit with the Florida Panthers, man. I mean, as much as it pains me to say this, he is a perfect fit for what the Panthers' identity is and how good they've been. How impressed have you been with what they've been able to do this postseason?
I mean, I'm impressed doing it back to back. And the fact that the Oilers are there too, it's just as hard to make it to the final and lose as it is to win. I mean, like physically and obviously mentally, obviously all the things. But to do it in back-to-back years, that's such a short off season. All those little, people see the big injuries and, oh, this guy needs surgery, that guy needs this and that. But sometimes it's the little things, man, like your wrists. Like you got like this little pain that won't go away. You can play through it, but like to have a short off season, like it doesn't go away. You don't have enough time to like recover, train, get ready, and then you're all of a sudden back in training camp, and like that little nagging thing that you had is still there. And then now I guarantee it's going to be there for the next 10 months as well, right? So it's those little things that sometimes that impresses me, is the ability to physically recover, mentally kind of have the reset and get yourself ready for another grind of a year. Obviously that comes with benefits of like, what it takes and kind of, the level of play and practice that's needed to make it there. But that's tough. That's really tough and so incredibly impressive. But like I said, like I've never stepped foot inside that locker room. I don't know, exactly who those guys are, but I can tell. I can just by watching how they play and watching their consistency and watching their attitude, in between the whistles, after the whistles, on the bench, in the interviews. You can really see the tone of the team and who they are. And obviously, Marshy would fit into that. I mean, he's a great teammate. He's what you see is what you get, right? He's a very honest competitor as far as the effort that he's going to give, and he's going to hold himself accountable. He's going to hold his teammates accountable, like all those things, and he's going to be fine when he's held accountable, right? So it just seems like they have a locker room full of guys like that.
Yeah, Brad Marchand, it was tough for him to go during the trade deadline. Obviously, it was such a splash here. I'm friends with the Katie Engelson, who's the Florida Panthers reporter and has been traveling with the team. And I messaged her immediately, probably actually a week later after Marchand got there. He wasn't playing yet. And I said, what do you think? And she because I told her, I was like, you're going to love this guy. Like, what do you think already? And she's just like, man, like, this is not an exaggeration of what kind of a vibe he brings, even though he hadn't been playing yet, what kind of a person, what kind of an energy. And we're talking about his style fitting in on the ice, but it's hard to imagine his personality and the positivity, the togetherness that he brings wouldn't fit into any team. So I'm happy for him and how he's doing. And the Florida Panthers are scary to watch. A word we've been using on this podcast is unbothered. Like, it's just, even in their post-game interviews, and this is the hardest championship to win. And yes, I'm biased, but we don't have to have that debate. It is absolutely the hardest championship to win in all of sports, and it's such a grind, as you know. And it just feels as though, and the Florida Panthers are not, I know they're not like cruising through. I understand how difficult it is, but it just, in their interviews and their attitude, it just feels like they're untouchable until the final, because Edmonton, obviously, especially after last night's game too, looking fantastic. So will we see a rematch? Who knows? But let's, I guess, if you don't mind, I know it's so hard to give a prediction, but are you expecting a rematch? And if so, do you have any thoughts on if Edmonton can kind of kill the beast this time around, if they get there, of course?
Well, I'll give you that, but I'll go back to something you said earlier, just about Marshy and how he could fit into any locker room. And I'll actually push back on that a bit, because I don't think he would. I think that he does need an environment that like I said, when you talk about coaching and when you talk about the culture and all that, like if he walks into a room where players aren't being held accountable, and guys are kind of on their own page and like, I'm playing for who I am because I'm this type of player and this is most important, as opposed to like, I'm playing for this team and because of the team culture, like a very much more individualized locker room. I don't think he would fit in. It would drive him crazy. And so it's not always a fit, right? Like even with a really great player and a great attitude, you go into the wrong locker room or the wrong type of culture and you actually grind against the gears of it, right? Because you try to go into a room and, hold people accountable, or you're in practice going a million miles an hour and working hard like he does, and everybody else in practice kind of looking at you like you're crazy. Like, you're not going to fit in. And so that was a good fit for him and probably better than some others. So I'm happy for him. I'm obviously, I would love to see him have success. But to answer the second part of the question, like the Oilers are flying high. I would love to see a Canadian team win a championship, and obviously a place where I grew up and a team that I played for as well. That fan base is so incredible. Even on road games, they fill up the stadium. They fill up the watch areas. They got probably 40,000 people all just kind of gathered for a giant party. They love their hockey so much. So it would be impossible for me to cheer for Marshy over the Oilers, just because it would be so special for a Canadian team to finally kind of crack through and actually win. I got close in Calgary. 304, we lost to Tampa. every other team, I think, other than, well, the Leafs haven't, obviously. And then I guess Winnipeg hasn't been to a final, but every other Canadian team has made the final and been so close. And it's just such a different vibe. I mean, you're obviously up in Toronto, and you get it. There's some great hockey cities in the States. I get it. I love it. I love the fan base, but it's different. It's just a different thing up on this side of the border. And so I don't know. The Panthers are flying high. They really are, especially this series, just absolutely dominant.
Andrew, I just want to say one thing. I'm glad that the Canadian team didn't win in 2011. That's all I'll say.
Well, they burned down their city.
Yeah, they weren't too happy. Yeah, gotta remember that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy up here for sure. As far as the Oilers, like, they continue to defy my expectations as well. Like, but those, obviously, Draisaitl and McDavid are so good, but they're getting that supporting cast this year in a much bigger way. It's not that they didn't have it last year. You don't make the finals with just two guys going strong, but this year it seems like they have more guys that aren't just waiting for McDavid and Draisaitl to do something special. So it'll be interesting if they get back to the finals. I think it'll be a different finals this year if Edmonton gets there.
Well, listen, thank you so much for all your insight. Time flew by. It is time to let you go. You gave us 50 minutes, so a lot longer than 30. Thank you, Andrew, for being a guest on the show. We've got to pay some bills. We got to send it to break.
Thanks,
Adam and I will be back to wrap the show on the other side of the break. Andrew, thanks a lot. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It feels like I'm lying when I say this, but I'm not, I promise. For the first time in 92 years, since 1933, feels like a prank, Team USA wins the IIHF World Championship. And the reason we're bringing this up is obviously because we are in the U.S., but also because we want to highlight some Bruins who had some great performances during the World Championship. But yeah, congrats to Team USA. Adam Pellerin. That's crazy. 1933, last time that happened. So yay, champions once again. But yeah, Jeremy Swayman with a great performance for Team USA, and not obviously for the U.S., but Elias Lindholm, the leading tournament scorer. So as well as some other guys obviously worth mentioning. We saw Andrew Peeke there, Mason Lohrei, but those two standing out because they wanted better seasons with the Bruins. This should probably do some good for them in terms of confidence-wise.
Yeah, hopefully it does, right? Hopefully it's a springboard for success and just feeling good about yourself going into training camp. Obviously, last year was such a disjointed training camp, and we heard that word used a bunch, and Jeremy Swayman certainly fits in that category. Elias Lindholm, who we discovered had the back injury, it was disjointed for him because of that. And so, yeah, you're hoping that the strong finish to the end of the year for Lindholm and Pastrnak again, I mean, he led the tournament in points, and Lindholm, as you mentioned, led it in goals, can have them feeling good going into training camp. And you're also looking at a prospect in Dans Lochmelis, who had a good World Championship tournament as well. But I think the most important player that had a good tournament, Jeremy Swayman, right? I think that's what you look at. And you heard you saw the tweets, and he also talked about having a great summer. We finally did it after all these years. So the numbers were very good, 7-0 with a 169 goals against average. So yeah, hopefully that's a sign of things to come.
Yeah, absolutely. 25 save shutout for the gold medal there, or for the win by Jeremy Swayman. And can you say Dans Lochmelis again? I think you got the official pronouncer. I haven't gotten it yet. Dans
Lochmelis. Yeah.
Okay.
So he of course, Bruins draft pick, and played at UMass. So saw him a little bit with Hockey East this past season.
Yes, and this was a story from a couple weeks ago now, but Sidney Crosby giving him props, so that's obviously a very, from the tournament, it's a very, very good sign of things to come as we look ahead to the Bruins' future, hoping for a better season. But yeah, great for Jeremy Swayman just to get to I know the NHL season ended differently, but just to have that going into training camp coming up, and same for Lindholm and Pasta being Pasta. So if you guys ever need a reason to watch hockey if your team is out of the playoffs, that's one of them, just to see how the guys are doing and what prospects you have. But congrats to Team USA, like I said, for the first time in 92 years. Pretty crazy. Adam, a little shorter segment because we've got one more bill to pay. The reason we can put on the lights in the studio for your tan is because of commercials. So we're going to send it to commercial again, and we'll be right back to wrap the show. Welcome back. Adam, you have 40 seconds to tell me what you're going to do on this holiday Monday. Are you continuing work after this, or can you go home and chill?
I have a couple things to clean up here at the office, but I will be going home, and we are hosting a cookout, come to find out.
Oh, you just found out. Okay, perfect. You got to go home and get the hot dogs then, or go stop at the grocery store.
I hope we have enough propane. That's all I'm going to say, because
okay.
I don't know where I can get it if we don't.
I would love to see the text between you and your wife right now, because I'm sure you're saying, I don't know, honey, if we got it. I guess you're surprised about this cookout? You didn't know it was happening, eh?
Oh, I mean, I kind of did, but it's confirmed, and I still don't know how many people are going. So
I love this. I wish we had actually a little bit longer to dive into the intricacies of this barbecue, the surprise barbecue that you're having. Well, at least the sun's out, from what I understand. It's nice in Toronto. Yeah. So not a holiday here. We had ours last weekend, so I will be hosting another show. Catch us at 2 o'clock for Respect Her Game, everyone. Thanks for being on. We'll see you Wednesday. Have a great long weekend, and we'll talk to you then. Bye.